Hello, and welcome to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee's Alumni Association's Mobile Master Chats. While we can't be with you on campus, we are happy to bring you our Mobile Master Chat series, bringing big ideas to your small screen. My name is Bonnie Fugiasco. I serve as the Special Events Manager for the Alumni Association at UWM, and we've got a great program lined up for you today, folks. Our speaker today is Dr. Joseph Walzer. He is the Project Director of the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee. He's also a lecturer in History and Ethnic Studies at UWM. He is a proud and committed Panther alum. Dr. Walzer graduated from UWM with his BA in 2005. He got his MA in 2009 and followed that up with a Ph.D. in 2017, so three-time Panther. He first joined Encyclopedia of Milwaukee as a graduate research assistant back in 2013, where he would write over 30 entries for Encyclopedia of Milwaukee before his graduation. He was grateful to be able to rejoin the project as its director in 2018. Joe specializes in race and ethnicity in urban history with an emphasis on Milwaukee. He is currently revising his dissertation called Making an Old World Milwaukee, German Heritage, Nostalgia, and the Reshaping of the 20th Century City for a publication by University Press. So we will watch for that. So without further ado, Dr. Walzer, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Bonnie, and to you and Kyle and Amy and everybody at the Alumni Association for inviting me here to talk with you all today. And of course to Abby for her tech wizardry, definitely made this impressively painless process here. And thank you all who've been able to join us here today too. I'm really happy to have the opportunity to share this project that I've spent a lot of time on and have really come to love. With all of you here today. So today I'm going to do a few things. I have a few things here on our agenda. First of all, I want to explain a little bit about the project, what's in it, how it was built, what you can find when you actually go to the website. But then I also want to take some time to highlight some of the key narratives about Milwaukee history that come out of the encyclopedia. Let's say if you really do a deep dive into it and you kind of explore it, what are some of the things that you'll be able to find? And then I think we'll have some time for Q&A at the end as well. So first of all, what is the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee? Well, it's your first stop for exploring Milwaukee history, right? So it's a digital urban history encyclopedia. So a lot like, you would go to the library and go look for an encyclopedia. This is basically the same concept online, right? So if you're interested in learning more about the history of the Milwaukee area, if you're a researcher, a student, general public, this is a great place to start, right? To kind of go in and see what some of the topics are that are available and to kind of jump off from there to then doing some deeper dives. And I'll talk more about some of the features that we have available to be able to do that as well. So we actually started building this project over 10 years ago. So this is 10 years in the making. It was built here at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in the history department. Amanda Seligman and Margot Anderson, who I believe had given one of these talks last week, they launched this project in partnership with a few colleagues at Marquette and assembled a editorial board that then compiled a list of entries. And this was funded with tremendous support, of course, from UWM, but also the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, and so on, and actually some great help from private donors as well. So we have, as I said, approximately 700 entries. So this is really a large project. Thus the 10 years in the making. And these 700 entries offer comprehensive and authoritative coverage of, the key people, places, events, and themes in Milwaukee history. And authoritative is a really key term there in thinking about what an encyclopedia does, right? So this is really well thought out and well vetted knowledge that we're presenting. Um, and the entries, they range from short specific entries on, let's say, people, places, things, but also some broad thematic entries too, to kind of thinking about things like what is work, what's the economy, workers' movements, politics, and thinking more thematically about some of those things as well. As you can imagine, a project like this, building 700 entries requires a tremendous amount of time and energy and a wide array of abilities. And so we've really come to rely on a broad array of people. There've been a considerable amount of people involved in building this project. Scholarly researchers, experts who have built their career exploring particular fields and topics in urban history and social history. We also relied on local community experts such as John Gerda. You're probably familiar with John. George Wagner, Carl Baer, Jans Marty, Reuben Harpole, and so on. The real backbone to this project, though, has been students, though. More than half of our entries were written by graduate and undergraduate students with mentoring from faculty. So this really became a professional development opportunity for students to be able to produce meaningful pieces of public history then that they can use as part of their portfolio to launch their own careers or continue on with their education. Some of our other features that we're really proud of, we have a media library currently of over 1,300 paintings, photographs, postcards, and other images that's browsable by category. You can also find them through our search feature. And similarly, we currently have about 50 maps that's going to be expanding soon that are also similarly explorable. We've actually launched over the last year 2 new resources that we're really proud of. First is our digital bibliography. That's an expansion we had a print edition of a bibliography of Milwaukee history that came out, I believe, in 2013 or 2014. That at the time was the most comprehensive list that we could possibly come up with of sources on Milwaukee history to be able to then offer to researchers who are interested in exploring this history. It was also necessary for us to build to be able to write the entries that we did. But since then, there's a lot of other things that have come to light, other sources that we didn't catch the first time around, or things that have come out since then that we were able to kind of add this piece, this extra piece of over 1,800 sources that'll continue to grow as new things come out. That'll also be able to be filterable by category, as you can kind of see here in the image. And we're also developing a series of curricular guides, which we're building in collaboration with area teachers to be able to offer some great resources in teaching local Milwaukee history and the history of the region to folks, to students at levels from middle school on up into college as well. We also, one of the encyclopedia's key innovations was the development of features that allow for greater transparency and community engagement. This is really important to us. We wanted to make it clear to our users, researchers, students, the general public, that this knowledge that we're producing, this encyclopedic knowledge, didn't just come down from on high, right? It's the product of painstakingly thorough research, editing, and fact-checking. That there were a lot of people involved in this process, a lot of hands in building this. And so 2 things that we did to kind of make that clear. First of all, we added footnotes to it. And actually, if you go into an entry, at the bottom, there's a little plus sign. If you click on that, it'll actually extend the footnotes then, and you can be able to see, where did this research come from? How do we know what we know? And another way that we did this was by developing the genre of understories. And these are short essays that we've attached to our entries, and actually you can even find them in the top bar as well, that explain more about this process, and if there's controversies behind the topic that need to be explored more, or what are some of the challenges to building this information? What's left to be done? What don't we know? And trying to really kind of flesh out some of the problems and concerns and the processes that we did to actually produce this knowledge. We also understood that a public history project like this really relies heavily on community knowledge. And so we added a feature for users to be able to comment on our entries as well. So if you know of something that might have been missed or that might help fill out a story, I encourage you to go on and comment and provide us with the knowledge that you have. And also pay attention to our social media. We've been really trying to broadcast some of the great things that we found and discovered via Facebook and Twitter currently at the moment. And the comments that are left and the feedback that we end up receiving through social media and that kind of sharing has also helped us to think about possible revisions or additions or things that need to be added or amended in the narratives that we provide. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit here. So that's the project overall, and that's really what we've built. So what can you expect when you come onto the website? Like, what are some of the things that we've kind of fleshed out with this huge project, 700 entries? Well, it really kind of, one of the challenges of this was defining, what exactly is Milwaukee, right? That's a key question to a project like this, and hopefully one that it might not be obvious to go into the website with this question in mind, but hopefully one that the project helps to inform as you do explore it. Milwaukee, like probably most obviously, it's a place, right? But also there's a lot of questions that go into that. Like what is a place? What defines its boundaries? Where is it? What's it in relationship to? So what defines a city in general, right? Is it its buildings? I think we have a sense, kind of the common sense that we know how to identify a city when we come across it. But it could also be relationships, political relationships, economic relationships, social relationships, and so on. And we tend to think of urban as something that is distinct from rural, right? The city versus the country. But hopefully, one of the things that's come out of this project is a blurring of those lines, right? We really can't have one without the other. That the urban is not urban without the rural, and the rural is not rural without the urban, right? And there are distinct connections that are made there, and Milwaukee and the area around it is no exception to this. And we also have a lot to think about as far as a city's character, right? And Milwaukee, and this is some of my own research, there's a lot of talk about what is the character of Milwaukee. What is that? Who gets to define that? What are the elements that are part of that? And so there's a few things that have come out of the project that help kind of address some of these questions. And probably the most familiar to all of us is this vision of Milwaukee as being the brew city, right? This is everywhere. We see it in the heritage of brewing. Thinking about the history of beer gardens, beer halls, drinking culture in general, saloons, taverns, and the German word Gemütlichkeit, right? And these are all things that they have their own entries in the Encyclopedia, and in connection with one another, this history of this image of Milwaukee as being brew city really kind of comes out. But also, it's not just that, it's also the resistance to that. It's not a universally regarded and well-regarded concept, right? There have been movements that have tried to challenge that, including the temperance movement, the prohibition movement, with varying degrees of success. And then it's also an industry too, at many different levels. Of course, there's the brewing industry, but also the service industry relies on this. And this imagery of Milwaukee as being the brew city is really important to tourism. And you can go onto the encyclopedia and learn more about that tourist industry and the image of Brew City as being an important part of that. We're also familiar with Milwaukee as being the quote unquote machine shop of the world. Heavy industry is really important to how the city is imagined, how it has run, how it has economically developed and prospered. But then also the absence of it and deindustrialization has posed some tremendous challenges to the city's economy. We're familiar with names like Alice Chalmers, Falk, Pauline Harnischweger, and others. And these topics and these places all have entries in the encyclopedia. But also thinking more thematically about what is work, who's in the workforce, and the history of the city's economy is all wrapped up into this image of the city as being this machine shop of the world. And industry has done a lot to define urban space in general, right? Heavy industry and production and manufacturing is synonymous with places like the Menominee River Valley, Walker's Point, but then also places like West Allis and Cudahy, right, that were built around industries in general. We also think of Milwaukee as being a diverse place, and so that suggests that there have been immigrant and migrant communities that have come and helped define what the city is over time. Groups, of course, we think more prominently about Germans, Poles, Italians, and other white ethnic groups, European groups that have come in and have become part of the city, but also other migrant groups that have come in and have been a long standing parts of our community for a very, very long time. African Americans have lived in the city since its founding. Latinx Milwaukee, Asian Milwaukee, these are all parts of what helped make the city such a diverse place. But that has not come without its own challenges as well. Milwaukee is also a very highly contested space. Power and privilege, have been and are still to this day unevenly experienced in the city. And we see this in the histories of labor and capital, thinking about, who gets access to better jobs, what kind of wages they get, what kind of working conditions. And so there have been very intense strikes, for instance, in the city's history that have been very bitter and violent. Bayview in 1886 with the 8-hour movement, trying to fight for 8 hours of work, the 8-hour workday. Alice Chalmers in the 1930s and 1940s. Streetcar strikes. Patrick Cudahy in the 1980s, and we can. All of these strikes have a huge part in the history of the city as being a contested space, but then also they come out in the encyclopedia as well. And who has access to decent housing, education, employment, civic services too? These have been also racially defined, and these narratives really play a huge part in the city's history. The civil rights movement and its leaders, Val Phillips, Lloyd Barbie, Father Garappi, and there are prominent organizations such as the NAACP, the Urban League, but then also thinking more broadly about what is the civil rights movement, and the American Indian movement is a key part of this. Voces de la Frontera, UMOS, all come out of these narratives as well. And so thinking about the city as being contested space really puts urban change, into a new light, right? Develop a city's history is often written very much in its landscape. So, buildings, the different buildings that have come and gone, what's here, what's missing, right? Missing Milwaukee is a interesting topic that we've explored in the encyclopedia. Historic preservation, what gets saved, what doesn't, and thinking about the politics behind that as well. Who decides what happens in urban landscapes, and who ends up getting to benefit from it and who doesn't. And so, and that's written in the city's politics, and who is in City Hall, right, gets to really decide, make those decisions. And that's changed considerably over time. Democrats, Republicans, but also we have this heritage of municipal socialism as well, and a strong a conservative movement that has really emerged in the last 50, 60 years as well. But also thinking about the city as not just, within its own city limits. Those city limits have a distinct relationship with the area around it, and processes of metropolitanization are really important to the city's history. It's the city itself and the communities that surround it are dependent on one another, right? There's a need for the city to expand as it grows, right, which then brings in concerns about annexation and suburbanization, but then also how those boundaries define issues of control, right? The resistance of some surrounding communities to city politics, taxes, zoning, and then also the racial migration of certain populations and people of color have been a really important part of the development of Milwaukee and its politics. And so the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee has really had to consider, as part of it, the towns and villages that surround Milwaukee as part of this city's history. And so if you go onto the encyclopedia, you'll be able to find entries on places like Slinger, or what was once Schlesingerville. But also thinking about, as part of the city's economy, agriculture, and needing to be able to reap the resources of the area around the city as being key to, feeding its own population, but then also the city's industrial economy, right? Brewing wouldn't happen without access to barley and hops. Food processing, flour milling, these are all very much reliant on the land, but also things like the tanning industry and meatpacking industry, right, are reliant on agriculture and livestock. Tanning bark, for instance. But then also like the history of leisure, right? And the economies of some of the small towns around Milwaukee have really relied on city residents who seek to escape the city just to hunt, fish, or just explore nature, right? And just get out and enjoy nature. And so there have been these long histories of rural leisure and recreation, and thinking more specifically about, even expanding this history to quote unquote up north, right? What is up north, right? And how do we define that, and how that changes considerably depending upon who you talk to. So in thinking about these relationships too, it's also really important to understand the city's history, and the encyclopedia really tries to do this, thinking about the city's history as not just a series of economic and social relationships, but also part of this larger American project of claiming space and removing the original peoples that were here, right? Milwaukee would not exist as it is without this history of white settler colonialism that defined the city and its area, right? Things like agriculture and urban development are built on this really difficult history. And Native people, yes, removal, but Native people have continued to be a key part of the city and its history, and things in its cultural institutions, the American Indian movement as being part of the city's civil rights history, the Indian Community School, and Native people have been really key to that. And also, as we have come to understand these relationships of rural and urban, and the city's reliance on the area around it and its larger history, the environment has also become a key piece of how we understand the city's history and our relationship to the land, its resources, the wildlife that sustain us and surround us, our co-residents, if you will. And places like the Urban Ecology Center and other community groups have been really integral to this. And we've really tried to capture those things in the encyclopedia, just to make sure that's a representative. And so again, I'd like to emphasize the encyclopedia's role as a first stop for learning about Milwaukee history, right? So engaging with it, it's fun to poke around, and there really are some rabbit holes to get down as you click around. Believe me, I've fallen down many of those rabbit holes. But it's also a great jumping off point to then go and explore more, to then go to the archive and learn more about the things that the encyclopedia has done to highlight some of these stories. And hopefully it's a place for people to see a bit of themselves in the city's history. That the history of Milwaukee is more than just beer and bratwurst and these heritages of heavy industry that's been part of the past. It's still going. We're still building the city's history, and so hopefully that as you engage this, you're finding more a bit about yourself as you explore. So, well, thank you very much. Okay. Looks like we have a question here from the audience. Does the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee include Milwaukee County, or is it limited to the city? Hopefully I answered that in the talk, but yes, it does consider not just the Milwaukee County, but also histories of the larger area, including Waukesha, Ozaukee, Washington County. That's the statistical area. That's the area that a lot of these townships get their own entries and more specific consideration. But we also do a little bit on Racine County, Kenosha County, Sheboygan County, and Walworth County as well. So we're really thinking about the city of the history, or the history of the city as a much larger area. What are some of the most surprising things you've learned as you worked on the encyclopedia? Oh, okay. That's a really fun question. And it's also a hard one to answer, as I've kind of been part of diving deep into this thing. There's a lot of things that have surprised me, and I think that I hope that I shared a lot of what that is in my presentation here today. But I think that I'm thinking more specifically about one of the entries that I wrote, in thinking about the brewing industry as being, such an iconic part of how we think of the city. And, there are major names that we associate with that. Schlitz, Pabst, Blatz, Miller, like, we know these icons. However, it's actually more there. At one point there were as many as like 30 breweries operating in Milwaukee at one time, very early on. And so what comes out of it is actually there might be more of a story of failure attached to this, that more breweries ended up not succeeding and ended up getting swallowed up by these larger ones than actually ended up succeeding themselves. So that's one of the things that surprised me. What are the plans for funding this and keeping it going long term? Well, we really definitely want to make this an evergreen project, right? In other words, we're thinking about how to continue to keep the encyclopedia responding to new events. The coronavirus is definitely one of those things we're keeping an eye on, and thinking about how we might expand our public health entries, and then also provide more information on the history of like the Spanish flu and other public health concerns. So we definitely do want to keep this project going and responding, and thinking about other ways that we can make this more of a learning and teaching tool for other folks. So we're currently in the process of submitting a grant to the National Endowment for the Humanities. We're also seeking other grant opportunities. So we are seeking other sources of funding to be able to keep this going and expanding our content. All right. Let me see if I can. Our real new initiatives to remake Milwaukee included, such as the Milwaukee Tech Hub. Well, actually, so that's one of the topics that we're looking to expand on in the future is thinking about revitalization efforts, and so we're going to actually hopefully build an entry on that might include something like the Milwaukee Tech Hub. Thank you very much for that suggestion. Adding comments to stories online is an option, but what are other ways for the public to get you info? Oh, thank you. Yeah, so you can, yes, of course, like you can comment on the entries themselves. You can also send us messages via Facebook or Twitter. We also have a contact us portion on the website, so you can contact us with information that way. We really appreciate any and all comments and questions that you get to us. I mean, this is definitely helping inform the direction that the encyclopedia goes from here. And like I said, we really envision this as being "quote unquote" evergreen. We want to see this continue on into the future and continue to respond to historical inquiries and questions that of course scholars have approached, but then concerns and questions that the community has too. So thank you very much.
All right, Dr. Walzer. Well, that wraps up our Mobile Master Chat for today. We want to thank you for taking the time and joining us today and sharing this awesome resource. I am really excited to get onto your website. This is going to be our evening activity. I just know we're going to be fighting over what we're going to look up next. Seriously, this is great stuff. We encourage all of our viewers to hit the website and do some research and have some fun with this program. So thank you so much again, Dr. Walzer, for the great information and for your time today. Thank you to all of our viewers who joined us for our Mobile Master Chats. If you're interested in finding out more about our future programming or checking out past programs, look at our website at the UWM Alumni Association, and you can watch things on demand as well. So thanks again for joining us. Hope to see you next time. Have a great day.
Thank you.